A devoted mother is found dead from an apparent suicide.
Her body was in the bathtub. She had died from drowning. There was no other explanation for it.
They found a journal. She had been having some problems with depression.
But her loved ones aren't convinced.
She loved her family. She loved her job. She loved her friends.
Everything she did in her life was take care of her children.
Law enforcement isn't convinced either.
The fact that there was blood in the water, there was frothing in the mouth, I call it homicide. Your body's not going to let you kill yourself drowning in shallow water.
The investigation reveals a possible murder for hire.
A woman told them that her stepfather had hired a hitman to kill someone else.
They said, I need somebody to take care of her. He said, I know somebody who can help you.
At the center of it all is a woman with a personal vendetta, one that could endanger even more lives.
She had killed my mom. My life's probably in danger too.
We know her to be, however you define it, evil.
May 24th, 1992, Jackson, Mississippi. It's Sunday afternoon, and Richard Mosby and his new wife are dropping off his two young sons at their mother Gail's home.
Deborah and Richard had the boys, Bill and Joseph, for the weekend. They were 7 and 9. They were to return the children to their mother at 5 p.m.
We knocked on the door, my mom didn't answer.
Door's locked and it never locked. I was trying to figure out what's going on because my mom's car's right there.
I'm so young, I'm not thinking anything's... You don't go there when you're that age. But I got the sense that Bill understood something was wrong.
Richard's wife, Deborah, leaves a note on Gail's car, and they ask the next-door neighbor to call if they hear from her.
About 6 o'clock, the neighbor was concerned because Gail was very responsible. There was some reason why she would not be there. So he had a key, and he went into her home to look for her.
Everything seemed orderly in the house, which was consistent with the way she did things. She was apparently a neat housekeeper, but everything appeared to be in order.
At least until he reached the main bathroom.
And he was horrified to find that she was in her bathtub, and Gail Mosby was dead.
She was unclothed. Her body was in the bathtub with her feet hanging outside the bathtub. Her head was still underwater. She had died from drowning. There was no other explanation for it.
Gail's neighbor immediately calls 911. Police and paramedics arrive on the scene minutes later.
When the police arrived, they noticed no sign of a struggle. They didn't see anything being disturbed. They found her clothes had been folded and left by the bathtub. They also found a journal. Also, they did find some prescriptions. I can't specifically recall what they were, but the kinds of things you would expect somebody who had been depressed to have been prescribed. You put that package together, that kind of tips you over towards suicide.
But before that determination can be made, police must do a full evaluation of the scene.
That evening, I was just on active patrol, and I got the call of a deceased subject at that location. and there was no signs of any disturbance, any foul play. I did notice that one of her legs had a small bruise on the inside of her left ankle. I could tell there was frothing from the mouth, and there was a small amount of blood in the water, which would indicate the lungs were struggling for air.
To an experienced officer, something immediately stands out.
The thing that got me is the fact that the water was shallow. Your body's not going to let you kill yourself drowning in shallow water. Your body's going to fight. It's not going to let you drown in inches of water. Normally, I probably would not have even called the homicide detectives out. But the fact that there was blood in the water, that there's just inches of water in the tub, I called homicide.
They thought that my mom had committed suicide. I never believed that for a second. My mom valued family the most in life. I knew something happened to her.
Gail Petkovzak was born September 13, 1952, in Natchez, Mississippi. She was one of 3 sisters raised in a devoutly Catholic home.
My grandparents, Frank and Jackie, had 3 daughters, Gail, Lisa, and Jackie. Gail was the eldest. My mom is Lisa. She was the middle child, and then Jackie was the baby.
They were a loving household. My grandparents understood that, you had to work hard to be able to appreciate the fun things in life.
My Aunt Gail growing up, they always described her as very studious. She was very, very intelligent. She graduated as salutatorian of her high school.
When my mom graduated from high school, she went to Northwestern to study to become a nurse.
Post-graduation, she became a very successful NICU nurse, where she took care of the tiniest and most fragile little babies and enjoyed her job immensely.
By her late 20s, Gail had a thriving career in Jackson, Mississippi, and she was ready to start a family of her own.
My mom and dad met when my Aunt Liz, who worked with my mom, introduced them.
Richard Mosby was from Canton, Mississippi. He was referred to as happy or smiley. He always had a big smile on his face.
Richard's fun-loving nature was the perfect complement to Gail's ambition. After a brief courtship, they decided to tie the knot.
My parents were married in 1981. They had my brother Bill in 1982, and then I was born in 1985.
They appeared to be very happy, very much in love, and Gail was happy to finally have found someone.
To support their growing family, Richard started a tire business in Hammond, Louisiana. He and Gail bought a house there and settled into their new life.
My first memories of life were growing up in Hammond. My dad was a great dad, and my mom was a great mom. I felt loved by both of them.
My father had a family tire business in Canton, Mississippi that was fairly successful, and I think my dad wanted to try to duplicate that, but unfortunately the business failed.
Gail continued to work as a nurse, but 2 children and rent payments were too much to afford on one salary. So she and Richard made the difficult decision to move back to Jackson.
When they moved back, Richard went back to work, I understand, for the tire company. He was not making the money he had made prior. There was a lot of stress.
The failure of the tire business and the strain economically that it put on my family ended up leading to them divorcing.
My parents got divorced in 1986, but they still got along great. I mean, it was a happy family still. It's just that they weren't married.
Following the divorce, my mom had full custody and my dad had every other weekend.
They got along better post-divorce than they did when they were married. They were very amicable.
2 years later, Richard remarried, but Gail remained single. For her, motherhood came before everything else.
My mom's greatest aspiration was to be able to see me and my brother successful and grow up to be the best we could be.
I don't know how my mother could be as patient as she was with me. That's what made my mother such a great mother, is how much I sensed that she cared about me.
After being a single mom for 6 years, Gail has been found dead in her bathtub of an apparent suicide. Her journal, found at the scene, offers a potential reason for why she would end her own life.
She had been having some problems with depression at the time. It describes a very unhappy breakup with the woman she had been having apparently pretty long-term relationship with.
I never really knew that they were dating at the time, my mom and her girlfriend, but I still remember my mom on the couch after they had broken up, you know, crying and just being very, very affected by this breakup.
In Mississippi, in the early 90s, having a homosexual relationship would have been a very troubling thing to do in terms of societal acceptance. That would cause someone to have a hard time expressing their heartache.
Mississippi's still a conservative state, and there still is a stigma among certain people, and the climate at that time, a relationship would have been defined a lot differently.
Even with that potential motive, not everyone on scene that day is convinced that Gail Mosby chose to end her life.
There was just something amiss, and it's that old police gut feeling that something was wrong. Everything was just too damn neat. It almost looked staged. There's something we're missing here, and I can't put my finger on it.
Coming up, investigators hear about a personal grudge.
She was very nasty towards my Aunt Gail. She did not like her.
And an informant agrees to wear a wire.
It does establish that they were in the house when Gail died, and they weren't there for honorable purposes.
On the night of May 24th, 1992, with several questions lingering about single mother Gail Mosby's apparent suicide, Jackson police send homicide detective Al Ledoux to the scene.
He was a great detective, and he paid attention to detail. He immediately started working as a murder. There was a possibility that maybe she took some meds, had a bad reaction, but you know, you got to explore all possibilities. There was absolutely nothing that would indicate anything was wrong other than there was a dead woman in the bathtub. He and I both just knew there was just something we were missing, but we didn't know what it was. And he was gonna find it.
He looked around a lot and did not see anything turned over, you know, no indication that anybody had tried to break in a window or the door. But he did happen to notice that there was a framed picture. The glass was cracked.
The more I looked at it, the more I got suspicious of it. And so was the lead detective. He and I, we just said, there's something wrong.
Investigators look to the coroner to confirm their suspicions.
The crime scene's mine. The homicide case is the homicide detectives, but the body belongs to the coroner.
As part of his duties, he pronounced her deceased and, you know, looked at the scene, and there was nothing to indicate foul play.
There was a small abrasion on her nose, but nothing that indicated that anybody had beaten her into an unconscious state and put her in the bathtub.
The coroner rules Gail's death accidental.
I said, really, can you really drown in this bathtub? And his word was to me exactly this. He said, you can if I say you can. And I knew then, okay, this is where it's going to go. He and I got along up until this point, all the years we worked together. But I thought it was a bad judgment call on his part. And he wasn't willing to look at any other options. And for some reason, he dug his heels on this particular case due to the fact that the lead and I both felt that there was something wrong. We put on our offense report there was a death pending, and that left the door open for us for further investigation.
For now, their next step is informing Gail's immediate family of her death by apparent suicide. Ex-husband Richard is left the grim task of delivering the news to their children.
He said, look, we got to tell you something. Your mom's dead. And I said, you're joking. Well, then my dad started crying, and then I knew. And I collapsed. And I don't ever remember getting up.
Even at that age, I understood what suicide was. So to have someone tell me that my mom committed suicide was just the most absurd thing that I could think of.
As investigators contact more of Gail's family about the circumstances of her death, her loved ones say it's more likely someone did this to her.
2 weeks prior to her death, Aunt Gail called my mom and was worried that something was going to happen. And she said she didn't feel safe. My mom, as a sister would do, tried to reassure her, I'm sure everything's going to be fine. But my mom had to go, so she cut the conversation short. And unfortunately, that was the last time she spoke with her.
Her sister suspects Gail's concerns had something to do with Richard and his new wife, Deborah. She says tension has been growing between them since Deborah and Richard got married 4 years ago.
After the divorce, Aunt Gail and Uncle Richard, they were very amicable, co-parented very well. After Debbie came into the picture, the parenting dynamic changed a little bit.
Debbie was married before she met my dad. She had 2 children. One of them did not survive infancy. And after my dad and Debbie got married, they had a daughter, Sarah. Debbie treated my brother and I tremendously different than the way she treated Sarah.
Debbie and my father's relationships sort of made us a little bit more secondary. It was now this third party that controlled what we were going to be doing.
All of a sudden, my mom and my dad, they started having custody battles. They're in and out of court. There's alimony disputes, and it was clear that Debbie was the one spearheading those problems.
Gail's family tells police that Deborah resented any reminders of Richard's life before her.
She didn't even like the fact that my Aunt Gail didn't change her last name post-divorce. Aunt Gail simply stated it was because that was her boy's last name, but I know it very much was a problem for Debbie.
There couldn't be a more striking difference living with my dad and Debbie versus living with my mom. My mom was loving. Living with my dad and Debbie, it was like a complete absence of love.
Debbie was very nasty towards my Aunt Gail. It was very evident that she did not like her.
Her utilities had been cut off. She had no proof who it was, but we all assumed, Gail and me and the police department, that it was coming from Debbie.
And And investigators learned the situation had been a contributing factor to Gail's recent breakup.
Whatever relationship that Gail had with the woman, it ended because of all the drama that was involved in it.
But without evidence to support the idea of murder, there is little investigators can do.
In the absence of some information that indicated death by another identifiable person, there just wasn't anywhere to go with it. And so nothing really happened until the fall. In September, a woman who we now know as Vicki Mordecai went to the office of the FBI on a Sunday afternoon. And she was terrified. And what she said changed the investigation.
Months after the death of Gail Mosby, a woman approaches the FBI seeking protection in exchange for information about the case.
What Vicki Mordecai tells this FBI agent was that she and her husband, a guy named Ricky Mordecai, were in the business of raising marijuana up in northeast Mississippi, and that an entire crop had disappeared. They were in business with her stepfather, Roy Kyle. Roy Kyle was accusing them of having stolen the crop. She told them that her stepfather, she felt, was going to hire a hitman to kill her and her husband. And that she was terrified because she knew that he had hired a hitman to kill someone else previously. A woman in Jackson, Gail Mosby. She began to describe this scenario, this woman in the bathtub. They went over to this woman's house and killed her. She said in the course of it, something glass got broken. He looks at this set of circumstances and says, well, I don't know, this is a little too crazy. But he called the Jackson Police Department, Homicide and Robbery Division.
When Jackson homicide detectives hear about the broken glass, they immediately know Vicki is telling the truth, because that detail was never made public.
So the detectives said, I want to talk to her. So she came over there and, told him the story. And he says, from whom did you get this information? She told him that she had heard this from her sister, Debbie Mosby.
According to Vicki, her and Debbie's stepfather, Roy Kyle, was only the middleman.
Deborah said, I need somebody to take care of Gail. Can you help me with it? He said, well, yeah, I know somebody who might can help you.
What Vicki says that Deborah-Mosby told her was that Billy Ray Ford, this hitman, had come over to their home. They lived in Canton, picked up her husband, Richard Mosby, and they drove over to Gail's house.
There was no sign of any forced entry because Gail thought she was only letting Richard in. And she didn't know Billy Ray was hiding behind the door.
Vicki says once the door was open, Billy Ray attacked Gail. And in the ensuing struggle, the picture frame shattered.
The murderer had covered her mouth and nose with a rag soaked with something until she was unconscious. And then he had taken her to the bathtub, poured the water till it got high enough and it drowned her.
When investigators run a background check on the alleged hitman Billy Ray Ford, they find a history of violence, including a past conviction for the attempted murder of the sheriff in Warren County, Mississippi.
It was reversed on appeal, so that was not a viable conviction to use against him. But, you know, he was a known criminal element out there.
Detectives put out a bolo on Ford and turned their attention to Deborah-Mosby.
We knew she was harassing Gail to the point of utter absurdity, just to get her to back off collecting the child support that she was certainly entitled to.
Deborah's history with Gail adds credence to Vicky's allegations and gives Jackson police enough to open an official investigation.
We believe at that point that Gail did not commit suicide. That did not happen. So, got to do something about this.
Coming up, a history of tragedies raises even more questions.
Couldn't get past the idea that we're talking about two people who drowned in a bathtub. It sure is unusual.
And investigators face a political battle to prove their case.
She was buried without an autopsy.
So we get an order to have Gail's body exhumed.
Richard and Deborah-Mosby have emerged as the primary suspects in his ex-wife's murder. But for now, the only evidence detectives have comes from a confessed marijuana farmer. With more direct evidence needed, detectives ask both Ricky and Vicky Mordecai to wear a wire.
Ricky and Vicky get wired up. They go up to Richard and Deborah's house. Ricky and Vicky are still thinking that Billy Ray Ford has a contract to kill them. So they go there to talk to Deborah and Richard about how terrified they are and can Deborah intervene and keep this hitman from coming to kill them just as he did Gail.
With investigators listening in, Deborah admits knowing Billy Ray, but denies hiring him to kill anyone.
What Deborah was talking about was not that she hired him to murder her. She hired him to go over there and scare her or rough her up or, you know, just make her go away. The language is not the smoking gun we want, but it's helpful. It does, in fact, establish that Billy Ray Ford and Richard Mosby were in the house when Gail died.
After the sting operation, police subpoenaed Deborah's phone records.
About a month prior to Gail's death, one night, Deborah-Mosby calls her stepfather, who happens to have connections with a hitman.
Roy calls Billy Ray Ford, who in turn calls Deborah, and then Deborah calls him back. To our knowledge, Deborah had never known Billy Ray Ford before she was put in touch with him by Roy Kyle.
Call logs show that in the month leading up to Gail's death, Deborah and Billy Ray spoke several times.
These people don't know each other from Adam's house, Cat, but they're having all these conversations. It looked pretty bad, smelled pretty bad, but did we really have it? Not so sure. So we indicted them for conspiracy to commit murder.
Authorities arrest Richard, Deborah, and Billy Ray without incident. The bizarre murder plot captures headlines throughout the region.
My father and Debbie, they were trying to tell us that it was my grandparents and my aunts, and they were out to get us. There's no truth to it. Whenever I found out that Debbie was also arrested, my initial thoughts were, this sort of makes sense. I didn't think that my dad would have done something like that. That wasn't who he was.
News of the arrest also reaches someone from Deborah's past.
Deborah's ex-husband, who was a guy named Mike McLean, he contacted me and told me some just horrendous things about her.
Mike tells authorities about a tragedy that occurred in May 1988 before his divorce from Deborah.
They had a child named Angel, and Angel was wheelchair bound. And then they had another small child. Mike told me that the wheelchair bound child was supposed to be watching the child in the bathtub, and the child drowned. Mike said that Deborah tried to blame the wheelchair bound child for the negligence that caused that child to die.
Prosecutors can't ignore the similarities between the two incidents.
You couldn't get past the idea that we're talking about two people who drowned in a bathtub. It just kind of takes your breath away, doesn't it? Nobody ever could prove anything about that, but it sure is unusual.
Even with this new suspicious discovery, prosecutors aren't sure there's enough to get a conviction.
What you have to have in order to convict someone is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. We weren't there yet.
The DA's office continues to build its case, but their urgency increases when Richard and Deborah are released on bail.
They had custody of the little boy. I've never known that to happen.
Richard being the natural father, they went to live with Richard and Debbie.
Completely believing that Debbie had killed my mom. Now I'm living with her. I know that my life's probably in danger too.
Nearly 8 months after Gail Mosby was found dead in her bathtub, the two prime suspects in her murder, her ex-husband Richard and his new wife Deborah, have been released on bail. They've also retained custody of Gail and Richard's two sons, Joe and Bill.
My grandparents knew that Bill and Joe were being mistreated when they were in Richard and Deb's care, and they were doing everything they could to get custody of them.
Gail's parents ultimately prevail in the custody battle.
We moved to Baton Rouge and started living with my grandparents, which was just life-changing because now it's the first time that we've had some sense of normalcy since my mom was killed.
The prosecution, however, is still facing a major roadblock. Despite the evidence collected, the county coroner will not reverse his ruling that Gail's death was a suicide.
We knew that the cause of death was drowning, but we didn't have conclusive proof that the manner of death was homicide. She was buried without an autopsy.
One of the next things that we did was to get an order to have Gail's body exhumed and do an autopsy. One thing that we wanted to know was whether or not we could prove that she had chloroform in her system, but that was not successful. We couldn't prove or disprove that because the body was too decomposed.
The only way we were going to get this case is to call an outside pathologist.
My office hired Dr. Michael Biden, who was the premier forensic pathologist in the country. I tell him this whole story, and it was like he knew exactly where I needed to go. He said, go get your autopsy pictures. And so I did, and immediately he just zones in on this little bruise on her ankle. He knew exactly what had happened. But he said, you know, once you're unconscious, then you're not struggling anymore. They could take her unconscious body and pick her up by her ankles, place her in a body of water, and all they had to do was to get the water level over her nose.
Dr. Biden noticed abrasions on her nose, which is consistent with a rough cloth, like a towel being held over her nose. It was used to make her unconscious.
Dr. Biden said, this is not suicide. This is not an accident. This is a homicide. He made the same statement I did. You can't commit suicide in shallow water.
It didn't change the coroner's mind. He took the position that it was still a suicide and continued to do that.
He took the position that he was the coroner and that was the gospel, and there was no getting around it. To me, the victim was way more important than his ego.
Prosecutors hope that Dr. Baden's expert opinion will be enough to convince a jury. On October 10th, 1994, the joint trial of Deborah Mosby, Richard Mosby, and Billy Ray Ford begins.
Tommy and I decided that we would try the conspiracy to commit capital murder first.
As the state lays out its evidence for the conspiracy charges, one of the defendants decides to turn against the others.
It's not looking good to Billy Ray. So his lawyer comes over to counsel table and says, my client wants a deal, and he will agree to testify against Richard and Debbie, which is golden.
Ford's statement settles once and for all who the mastermind behind the murder really was.
He actually dealt with Deborah, who retained him, and she was the one he was talking to. Richard apparently pretty much did what Deborah told him to do.
It's the break prosecutors have been looking for. Now, they just have to convince a jury.
This was a case that had a lot of moving parts. The state never knows if there's going to be one person who just doesn't believe they proved their case.
With Billy Ray Ford agreeing to testify against Deborah and Richard Mosby, the couple's cases are severed. They will be tried separately for capital murder. In May 1995, the proceedings against Richard begin.
Richard decided to plead guilty to murder. So, of course, the death penalty was off the table at that point.
And it was a confusing time emotionally because as hateful and as angry as I was, the sense of relief was just overbearing. But it was very important to know that he pleaded guilty.
Prosecutors then turn their attention to the woman they believe orchestrated the crime.
The mastermind is Deborah Mosby, and we know her to be, however you define it, evil.
Debbie was the catalyst of this whole thing.
Deborah's trial begins in December 1995, 3 years after Gail's murder. The prosecution's star witnesses are the confessed hitman and a nationally acclaimed pathologist.
You can't discredit Dr. Biden. You can't do it. He's too good. He put the case together for us.
Deborah refuses to take the stand in her own defense, leaving state prosecutors to speculate on motive.
If Gail died, then the child support would stop, and that Social Security would start for the boys, which I believe at that time was going to be $1,300 a month.
My impression was that she just didn't like Gail Mosby. In fact, I think she hated her. And she just decided her life would be better without her. And it was worth having her killed.
The jury convicts Deborah on all charges, but becomes deadlocked on recommending the death penalty. Instead, she receives a life sentence.
It was the final nail in the coffin in the sense of, wow, she's where she belongs. She's in prison, and now she can't hurt anybody else.
In 2007, Billy Ray Ford and Richard Mosby were released from prison. In 2021, Deborah was released as well, after serving 26 years of her sentence.
One thing I learned from Debbie's conviction and from my dad's sentencing is that life in jail doesn't mean life in jail. It's a huge gut punch knowing that they're out of prison. But I'll say this, based on how my grandparents raised us, it's made the anger that we had towards them, it's made it small. Because what we have, it's way more important. What keeps my mom alive to me today is the relationship that I have with my brother, because she really instilled in us a sense of family, and we've never let that go.
I like to remind my own boys that, I was a product of one of the greatest mothers this world could have ever had. So I want them to be able to understand that even though she's not around, she's still all with them.
Suspended in an agonizing purgatory of unresolved grief. Yet, the universe possesses a solemn way of revealing its darkest secrets, often through the repetition of tragedy. In May of 1991, another young life was abruptly halted. Ray Clerks, the 24-year-old boyfriend of Shelley Norgard, was reported missing by his deeply devoted family. Ray was a young man of immense potential, a responsible soul who dreamed of taking to the skies as a commercial pilot. He was preparing to move to California, to step into a brighter future, a future that did not include Shelley. Once again, the specter of abandonment triggered the fatal tempest within Shelley's mind. As they lay together under a canopy of stars on the hood of a car, Ray voiced his intention to leave. The rejection proved fatal. In a chillingly calculated act, Shelley shot him in the head. She concealed his body in the trunk of her vehicle, a macabre secret she drove around with for weeks, before unceremoniously discarding his waterbed liner, wrapped remains into a vertical mine shaft. When university students exploring the caves discovered Ray's remains on May 25th, the tragic pattern became undeniable. The unmistakable scent of death lingering in Shelley's vehicle provided the undeniable physical evidence investigators desperately needed. Arrested on June 4th, 1991, Shelley eventually accepted a plea arrangement in 1993 for the second-degree murder of Ray, receiving a sentence of 20 years in the state penitentiary. For the family of Pamela Pitts, this provided a bitter comfort. The woman they suspected of extinguishing their daughter's light was behind bars, unable to inflict harm upon others. But true justice for Pamela remained elusive. The years slipped by, turning into decades. Shelley served her time, eventually finding release, securing employment, and even marrying, adopting the name Shelley Harmon. It appeared she had successfully buried her past. But the pursuit of truth is relentless. In 2011, a dedicated cold case team resurrected Pamela's file. A seasoned detective, listening with unwavering focus to 97 recorded telephone conversations from Shelley's time in prison, finally heard the echo of guilt. During a conversation with her father regarding the renewed investigation, a profound, heavy silence hung in the air, a silence that spoke volumes of shared, unspeakable burden. Armed with this subtle yet powerful psychological evidence, coupled with historical testimonies of Shelley's volatile state of mind on the night of the murder, authorities made their move on June 2, 2017, faced with the insurmountable weight of her past. A 50-year-old Shelley stood before a courtroom on March 1, 2021. She offered a sanitized confession, admitting to a heated confrontation with Pamela that escalated into an uncontrollable, fatal physical assault. She claimed the voices in the dark frightened her away, conveniently omitting the horrific desecration of the body for her confession. The court granted her credit for the 20 years served and the time spent awaiting trial. She walked out of the courtroom a free woman. For the families of the victims, this resolution is a complex tapestry of sorrow and relief. It is not the absolute retribution one might desire in the depths of grief, but is a definitive naming of the truth. This chronicle, while steeped in darkness, ultimately illuminates the unyielding resilience of the human spirit. The families of Pamela Pitts and Ray Clerks navigated a decades-long odyssey of pain with quiet dignity and unwavering devotion. They refused to allow the memory of their loved ones to be eclipsed by the brutality of their final moments. Instead, they choose to remember Pamela as a radiant, artistic soul who loved unconditionally, and Ray as the ambitious young man whose eyes were fixed on the horizon. In the face of unimaginable malice, the enduring love of these families stands as a testament to the essential goodness of the human heart. It reminds us that while we cannot always control the profound tragedies that disrupt our existence, we can choose to honor the light of those we have lost, finding balance and healing in the memories of their enduring joy. A popular teen is found dead at a local party spot. It is a horrific tragedy that shocks the quiet community of Prescott, Arizona, leaving investigators to uncover a web of dark secrets, complex relationships, and shocking allegations that cast a long shadow over the town. As authorities dig deeper into the case, the psychological profile of the individuals involved reveals deep-seated trauma and inner turmoil. Shelley Norgard, wrestling with severe abandonment issues stemming from her parents' divorce and a strained relationship with a stern, demanding father, viewed moving in with 19-year-old Pamela Pitts as her first real chance at a stable family connection. Pam, known for her bright smile, artistic aspirations, and zest for life, was the eldest of 4 children and a cherished mentor to her siblings. However, financial strains and the impending reality of Pam moving back home triggered deep insecurities within Shelley, who desperately feared being left behind and forced to return to an oppressive home environment. The investigation takes a chilling turn as rumors of ritualistic violence and cult activities circulate through local whispers, though investigators ultimately focus their attention closer to home. Following the discovery of Pam's burned remains in the Prescott National Forest, suspicion falls heavily on those in her inner circle. Despite conflicting alibis and intense police interrogations, years pass with little progress, leaving the case to grow cold. The silence is eventually broken years later by the grim discovery of another body in a vertical mine shaft. The victim is identified as 24-year-old Ray Clerks, Shelley's boyfriend, who had also been planning to leave her behind and move away to California. Confronted with mounting physical evidence, including fingerprints and blood found in the trunk of her car, Shelley ultimately confesses to shooting Ray in a fit of rage after he threatened to take his dogs and end their relationship. This breakthrough reignites the cold case of Pamela Pitts. Years later, a meticulous review of recorded prison phone calls uncovers a revealing conversation between Shelley and her father, leading to her indictment and arrest for the murder of her former roommate. Facing an aging array of witnesses and the complexities of a decades-old prosecution, the legal proceedings culminate in a guilty plea that brings a measure of closure, though it leaves grieving families grappling with the profound sorrow of lives cut tragically short. A popular teen is found dead at a local party spot, and the discovery is nothing short of horrific as investigators dig into the case. They uncover a slew of suspects and shocking allegations that cast a dark shadow on this small town, with rumors circulating about cult activity and ritualized killings. The victim, Pamela Pitts, was a 19-year-old known for her bright smile and zest for life, but her body was burned beyond recognition when found in the Prescott National Forest on the evening of September 29, 1988. As authorities navigate a twisted investigation, the body count rises, revealing a chilling trail of violence that stretches across decades. The tragic narrative begins in the expansive landscapes of Arizona, where locals utilize a national forest for recreation during the daytime. On that fateful September evening, a target shooter finishing up for the night came across a fire pit containing a pile of garbage bags and burned debris. Moving closer, he made the horrific discovery of an arm poking up from the ash. The Yavapai County Sheriff Office responded swiftly to the area known as Gordo's Pit, locating the brutalized and demeaned remains. Because the body was burned beyond recognition, initial on-scene assessments yielded little success, and investigators could not definitively determine if the site was a primary murder location or merely a dump site. Transported to coroner office, the medical examiner labeled the death as homicidal violence, but could not ascertain the exact cause due to the severe condition of the remains. Entomological evidence, specifically heat-kill fly larvae found during the autopsy, indicated a significant period had elapsed between death, insect development, and the subsequent burning of the body. Dental records eventually confirmed the victim was Pamela Pitts, who had been reported missing 13 days earlier on September 16, 1988. The Prescott Police Department and the Yavapai County Sheriff Office joined forces, immediately notifying Pam's family, whose devastation was profound and mind-boggling as they tried to comprehend who could inflict such cruelty on a vibrant young woman. Pam was the oldest of 4 siblings, deeply devoted to her family and serving as a wonderful mentor and sidekick to her younger relatives. Eager for independence by age 19, she moved in with her new friend, Shelley Norgard. Shelley had a mysterious background and appeared to struggle with abandonment issues following her parents' divorce and tension with her strict father, making it clear she wished to avoid moving back with him if Pam ever moved out. To make ends meet after moving in together during the summer of 1988, Pam worked at a local restaurant while harboring aspirations of attending beauty college. In August of that year, Pam reconnected with an old flame, Bobby Kitchener, rekindling a warm and enthusiastic relationship centered around friends and community. However, on September 16, 1988, Pam vanished without a trace. When Shelley called Paul Pitts asking if he knew where Pam was, claiming her roommate had taken off and not come home. Paul's initial concern escalated by Monday when Pam failed to show up for work. Knowing this was entirely out of character, he contacted the police department. 13 days later, his worst fears were realized when authorities informed him of the grim discovery in the forest. As detectives probed further into the household dynamics, Paul revealed unsettling information. Pam's car, purse, and all personal belongings had remained at the apartment the entire time, a crucial detail Shelley had conveniently omitted. Tensions had recently flared between the roommates over unpaid rent, and Pam had confided in her father that she was preparing to move back home, intending to inform Shelley of her decision. Investigators quickly turned their attention to those closest to Pam, beginning with her roommate and her boyfriend, Bobby Kitchener. Bobby provided a verifiable alibi, recounting how he had spent the evening with Pam downtown before leaving for work around 9:30, marking the last confirmed sighting of her alive. When detectives questioned Shelley and her boyfriend, Ray Clerks, discrepancies emerged regarding their timelines on the night of the disappearance. Ray admitted he could not confirm Shelley's whereabouts after 11:30 at night, while witnesses from the local party scene came forward with startling revelations. Friends reported that Shelley had been visibly angry on the night of the 16th, searching for Pam and claiming her roommate was responsible for everything wrong in her life. Furthermore, Acquaintances recalled Shelley making ominous comments in the past about knowing how to dispose of a body by making someone a missing person and burning them beyond recognition or dropping them in a mine shaft. As the investigation stagnated through the late 1980s, rumors of satanic cults and ritualistic sacrifices ran rampant through the town of Prescott, though none could be substantiated. In 1989, investigators explored a potential altercation between Pam and another local individual named Melinda Perry, leading to grand jury proceedings and perjury charges that ultimately did not hold up under scrutiny, leaving the case to go cold for years. The breakthrough finally arrived on May 25, 1991, when college students exploring a cave system discovered a vertical mine shaft containing the decomposing body of a young white male wrapped in a waterbed liner. The victim was identified through dental records as Ray Clerks, Shelley's boyfriend, who had been shot in the head. Ray's family had reported him missing after he failed to arrive for a planned trip to California, noting he was a responsible aspiring pilot who would never vanish without warning. Recognizing the chilling parallel of a second roommate associated with Shelley turning up dead after planning to leave her, investigators zeroed in on Shelley Norgard. Incriminating physical evidence mounted when Shelley's fingerprint was recovered from a flashlight inside the mine shaft, and a search of her and Ray's shared vehicle revealed the distinct smell of death and blood matching Ray's blood type in the trunk. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Shelley was arrested on June 4, 1991. Midway through her trial in 1993, she accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for a 20-year sentence in the Arizona State Prison. She confessed that she shot Ray during an argument when he told her he was taking their dogs and leaving her, subsequently hiding his body in the trunk before eventually transferring it to the remote mine shaft. While Ray family and Pam family felt the sentence was inadequate for the magnitude of the crime, Pam loved ones were left waiting nearly 3 decades for accountability in her murder. In 2011, a dedicated cold case team reopened Pam's file, re-examining 97 recorded jail phone calls made by Shelley prior to her release in May of that year, listening closely to these archived recordings years later in 2017. Investigators heard a telling conversation between Shelley and her father discussing the renewed police interest, culminating in an abrupt silence after her father noted she had never fully explained what actually happened. Armed with this circumstantial evidence and decades-old witness accounts, detectives arrested Shelley Harmon on June 2, 2020. Confronted with a trial complicated by the passage of 30 years and the loss of witnesses, prosecutors ultimately arranged a plea agreement in 2021. On March 1, 2021, Shelley stood before the court and confessed that she had struck and killed Pam during a heated argument at the party spot in 1988, though she refused to elaborate on the post-mortem mutilation of the body. Credited for the 20 years served for Ray's murder and time spent awaiting trial, Shelley was released from custody, leaving Pam's family to grapple with an imperfect form of justice while fiercely preserving the memory of a young woman who loved life deeply and whose radiant spirit continues to live on in the hearts of those who cherish her. A popular teen is found dead at a local party spot, leaving a small town shrouded in dark allegations of ritualized killings and cult activity. The brutal discovery of 19-year-old Pamela Pitts, whose body was burned beyond recognition in the Prescott National Forest on the evening of September 29, 1988, initiated a twisted investigation that spanned decades and ultimately exposed a chilling pattern of violence. As investigators navigated a complex case, they uncovered deep psychological turmoil, strained relationships, and a trail of blood that connected 2 horrific murders. The investigation began when a target shooter discovered a human arm protruding from a burned pile of garbage bags at a local fire pit known as Gordo's Pit. The Yavapai County Sheriff's Office responded immediately, confronting a crime scene so brutal and demeaning that the victim could not be initially identified. Medical examiners determined the cause of death as homicidal violence, noting that heat-killed fly larvae indicated the body had remained undiscovered for a significant period before being burned. Dental records eventually confirmed the victim was Pamela Pitts, who had been reported missing 13 days earlier after vanishing on the night of September 16, 1988. Pamela was remembered by her family as a vibrant, outgoing young woman who loved life and cherished her role as the oldest of 4 siblings. Earlier that summer, she had moved out of her family home to live with her 18-year-old friend, Shelley Norgard. For Shelley, who struggled with deep-seated abandonment issues stemming from her parents' divorce and a strict relationship with her father, living with Pamela represented a desperate chance for a family connection. However, by late 1988, financial pressures and unpaid rent began to strain their living arrangement. Pamela had confided in her father, Paul Pitts, that she intended to move back home, a decision she planned to break to Shelley. Behind Shelley's quiet exterior lay a complex internal world defined by insecurity and resentment. Investigators soon learned that Shelley had grown increasingly angry as she felt the foundations of her life slipping away. Witnesses later recalled that on the night of the disappearance, Shelley was frantically searching for Pamela, expressing bitterness that everything wrong in her life was Pamela's responsibility. Moreover, acquaintances noted that Shelley had previously voiced unsettling theories on how to dispose of a body by fire or drop it into a mine shaft, raising immediate red flags for homicide detectives. Despite mounting suspicion, initial interviews yielded conflicting alibis and dead ends. Shelley claimed she spent the night driving around and visiting friends, while Pamela's boyfriend, Bobby Kitchener, provided a verified alibi. Rumors of satanic cult involvement and fights at local party spots further complicated the investigation, leading to temporary theories involving other individuals, including a physical altercation with another local teen named Melinda Perry that ultimately resulted in unproven perjury charges. As leads dried up, the case went cold, leaving a grieving family waiting for a breakthrough. That breakthrough came on May 25, 1991. When college students exploring a cave discovered a vertical mine shaft containing the decomposing body of 24-year-old Ray Clerks, Shelley's boyfriend, who had been wrapped in a waterbed liner and shot in the head. Ray was planning to move back to California, without Shelley, effectively ending their relationship. Recognizing the parallel of a second roommate of Shelley's turning up dead after attempting to leave her, investigators focus intensely on Shelley and Ray's shared life. Fingerprint evidence on a flashlight inside the mine shaft and the unmistakable smell of death in the trunk of Shelley's car provided the breakthrough needed for an arrest. Faced with overwhelming physical evidence, Shelley ultimately pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in 1993 and was sentenced to 20 years in prison, providing a detailed confession of shooting Ray during an argument over their dogs while stargazing. Yet, the shadow of Pamela Pitt's unsolved murder lingered. Decades later, in 2011, a dedicated cold case team reopened Pamela's file, reviewing 97 recorded jail phone calls made by Shelley prior to her release. Investigators discovered a crucial conversation between Shelley and her father discussing a renewed police interest, which ended in a telling silence. This circumstantial evidence, combined with her proven capability for lethal violence against a partner attempting independence, led to Shelley's indictment for the murder of Pamela Pitts in June 2017. Facing trial in 2021, Shelley entered a plea agreement, confessing that she had sought Pamela out at a party spot, engaged in a heated altercation, and struck her until she stopped breathing. While the confession brought a measure of legal closure and officially established accountability for Pamela's death, the resolution left her family grappling with the complex reality of a justice system where time served and plea deals allowed the perpetrator to walk free, despite the heartbreak. The memories of Pamela Pitts and Ray Clerks endure through the unwavering love of their families, preserving the spirit of two young lives whose potential was tragically cut short. A popular teen is found dead at a local party spot, and the sheer horror of the discovery defies easy description. As investigators dig into the case, they uncover a slew of suspects, and shocking allegations cast a dark shadow on this small town, where rumors of cult activity and ritualized killing begin to circulate. Her body was burned beyond recognition, and as authorities navigate a twisted investigation, the body count rises. When they look down into a vertical mine shaft, they find a dead body hung up on lumber, revealing a trail of blood that links two murders. Yet the haunting question remains whether the killer will walk free, especially since very few of these cold case files ever come to fruition. The Prescott National Forest provides Prescott, Arizona residents with endless recreational activities, from riding dirt bikes to target shooting during the daytime. On the evening of September 29, 1988, one target shooter is just finishing up for the night. As he makes his way back to his truck, he comes across one of the area's many fire pits containing a pile of garbage bags, a portion of which had been burned. Initially mistaking it for a stick poking up from the ash, the gentleman moves closer and makes a horrific discovery: an arm. Within minutes, the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office responds to the area just outside of Prescott city limits, known to locals as Gordo's Pit, where they quickly locate a body. The remains show clear evidence of having been dumped on top of debris and set on fire in an incredibly brutal and demeaning manner, leaving the victim burned beyond recognition. Investigators search around for clues with little success, struggling to discern whether surrounding items are ordinary trash or associated with a homicide. While modern scientific testing with DNA allows labs to quickly determine relatedness, investigators back then lacked those advanced tools, leaving it impossible to determine whether Gordo's Pit was a primary murder location or merely a dump site. Transported to the coroner's office, the medical examiner labels the case homicidal violence but cannot determine the exact cause of death due to the condition of the body. Autopsy findings document heat-kill fly larvae, indicating a period between death and discovery, and subsequently between the growth of the larvae and the burning of the body. Dental records comparisons eventually identify the victim as 19-year-old Pamela Pitts, who had been missing for 13 days since she was last seen on the night of September 16, 1988, originally reported missing within city limits. The Prescott Police Department joins forces with the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office upon the grim discovery. For Pam's family, the news brings unimaginable devastation. Known for her bright smile, zest for life, and ability to make friends with anyone, 19-year-old Pam was the oldest of 4 siblings and deeply loved her family. By age 19, Pam was ready to leave the nest and moved in with her new friend, Shelley Norgard, during the summer of 1988, taking a job at a local restaurant to make ends meet while harboring dreams of attending beauty college. For 18-year-old Shelley, living with Pam represented a chance at family connection after struggle with her own background, parental divorce, and a strict father. In August of 1988, Pam reconnected with an old flame named Bobby Kitchener. But on September 16, 1988, the popular teen vanished without a trace. When Shelley called Paul Pitts to ask if he knew where Pam was, claiming she had not come home, initial worry quickly escalated when Pam failed to show up for work on Monday. 13 days later, Paul's worst fears confirmed when authorities informed him that his daughter's body was set on fire and burned beyond recognition, leaving him to grapple with the agonizing questions of who could commit such an act and why. As investigators interview people from Pam's inner circle, unsettling details emerge regarding her living situation with Shelley. Paul learns that Pam's car, purse, and all personal belongings were left behind at the house, a crucial detail Shelley never mentioned. Furthermore, tensions had been rising between the roommates over unpaid rent, and Pam had recently told her father she was ready to move back home. Concurrently, acquaintances described Shelley as untrustworthy and prone to telling stories, while friends recall her making unsettling comments about knowing how to dispose of a body through fire or dropping someone down a mine shaft. When interviewed by detectives, Shelley presents an alibi involving her boyfriend Ray Clerks and various acquaintances, though her timeline remains fuzzy. Investigators then turn to Bobby Kitchener, who confirmed spending the evening of September 16th with Pam before heading to work at 9:30, leaving him with a solid alibi. turning next to Ray Clerks. Detectives find discrepancies between his account and Shelley's regarding when she returned home on the night of the murder, and Ray eventually cuts the interview short out of frustration. Further interviews with friends who attended the party reveal that Shelley had been angrily looking for Pam that very night, muttering that Pam was responsible for everything wrong in her life. Months passed with rumors of satanic cults and ritualized sacrifices running rampant through Prescott, but none of these theories yield results. In the summer of 1988, a promising lead emerges from past witness statements regarding a physical fight between Pam Pitts and Melinda Perry at the park, during which Pam was reportedly knocked to the ground and kicked repeatedly. Investigators haul an 18-year-old Melinda Perry, who denies fighting with Pam and provides an alibi placing her at a motel party. In August of 1988, Melinda is summoned before an investigative grand jury and subsequently arrested for perjury due to inconsistent statements, though these charges are ultimately dropped after 2 years of legal battles, prompting Melinda to leave Arizona for Nevada. For 3 years, the case goes cold, devoid of new leads, witnesses, or analyzable evidence. Then, on May 25, 1991, a shocking discovery dredges the case back into light when college students exploring a cave system encounter a vertical mine shaft containing a decomposing young white male wrapped in a waterbed mattress liner. The autopsy reveals the victim was shot in the head, and dental records identify him as 24-year-old Ray Clerks, Shelley Norgaard's boyfriend, who had been reported missing after failing to show up for a family wedding in California. Recognizing that Shelley has now had 2 roommates go missing and turn up dead, investigators focus intensely on her. Ray's family notes that he had been planning to end his relationship with Shelley and move back to California without her, executing a search warrant on the home Shelley and Ray shared. Investigators immediately noticed the overwhelming smell of death in and around Shelley's car. The trunk reveals blood matching Ray's blood type, and fingerprint analysis places Shelley's print on a flashlight recovered from the mine shaft. Placed under arrest on June 4th, 1991, Shelley eventually accepts a plea deal midway through her trial in 1993, reducing the charge from first-degree to second-degree murder in exchange for a sentence of 20 years in Arizona State Prison and a full confession. She recounts that during a stargazing trip, when Ray told her he intended to take their dogs and leave, she lost her mind, shot him in the head while he lay on the hood of the car, covered him with a blanket, placed him in the trunk, and later transferred his body to the mine shaft using a 4-wheel drive truck. Though Pam's family feels the sentence is too lenient, they take solace in knowing she is behind bars, even though authorities still lack direct physical evidence to connect Shelley to Pam's murder. Another 18 long years pass in silence, until March of 2011, when a cold case team reopens the investigation. Detective Dart reviews the files and immediately recognizes Shelley's proven capability for murder, combined with her clear motive and track statements from the night Pam disappeared. In February of 2011, investigators interview Shelley in prison shortly before her scheduled release, prompting her to make 97 phone calls, which authorities begin recording. Although nothing immediate arises, Shelley is released in May of 2011, assumes the name Shelley Norgaard Harmon, marries, and starts a new life. Finally, in the spring of 2017, an investigator listens to all 97 recorded prison calls and hears a chilling conversation between Shelley and her father discussing the reopened investigation into the Pam Pitts case, culminating in an abrupt silence. Armed with this circumstantial evidence and past statements, investigators arrest Shelley Norgaard Harmon on June 2, 1997, bringing a surge of profound relief to Pam's aging father. As the case heads to trial, prosecutors face the daunting challenge of a 30-year-old timeline where many witnesses have passed away or suffer from dementia. To spare the family from an uncertain trial outcome, a plea agreement is reached, and on March 1st, 2021, Shelley stands before the court to confess that she struck Pam during a heated argument until she stopped breathing before fleeing the scene. Following her statement, Shelley is released from custody at the age of 50, receiving credit for the 20 years served for Ray Clerks' murder and the years spent awaiting trial. While the legal outcome leaves much to be desired for those seeking maximum accountability, Pam's family and investigators hold fast to the conviction that justice, however partial, has been secured for Pam Pitts and Ray Clerks, ensuring that their vibrant memories endure in the hearts of all who knew and loved them. A dark shadow fell over the small town of Prescott, Arizona, during the autumn of 1988, when the vibrant life of 19-year-old Pamela Pitts was brutally extinguished in a community where the expansive Prescott National Forest offered endless recreational activities and a serene backdrop for residents. A horrifying discovery shattered the peace forever. On the evening of September 29, 1988, a target shooter finishing his day near a local hangout spot known as Gordo's Pit noticed something unusual among a pile of burned garbage bags. What initially appeared to be a mere stick protruding from the ashes turned out to be a human arm, setting into motion one of the most chilling and twisted investigations in the history of Yavapai County. The victim's body had been severely burned beyond recognition, subjected to a level of brutality and demeaning violence that left seasoned investigators struggling for words due to the catastrophic condition of the remains. The medical examiner could not immediately determine the precise cause of death, labeling it simply as homicidal violence. Entomological clues recovered during the autopsy, specifically heat-kill fly larvae, indicated a significant delay between the time of death and the discovery of the body. Yet forensic tools of that era lacked the advanced DNA capabilities required to immediately pinpoint whether Gordo's Pit was a primary murder site or merely a callous dumping ground. Through dental records, authorities finally put a name to the tragic remains. Pamela Pitts, a beloved local teenager who had been reported missing 13 days earlier on September 16, 1988. Pamela was remembered by her family as a radiant, outgoing young woman who cherished her role as the oldest of 4 siblings. Known for her bright smile and infectious zest for life, she had recently moved out of her family home to live with an 18-year-old acquaintance named Shelley Norgard, for Shelley, who struggled with deep-seated abandonment issues stemming from her parents' divorce and a strained relationship with a stern father. Living with Pamela represented a desperate yearning for a stable family connection. However, as the summer of 1988 progressed, financial pressures and unpaid rent began to strain the household. Pamela quietly made plans to move back home, a decision that would inadvertently place her in the crosshairs of a deeply troubled and possessive roommate. When Pamela vanished without a trace after September 16th, her sudden disappearance baffled those closest to her, especially since her car, purse, and all personal belongings were left untouched at the apartment. Shelley Norgard's calculated indifference and failure to mention these glaring details immediately raised suspicions among investigators and grieving family members alike. As detectives dug deeper into the lives of those in Pamela's inner circle, they encountered a web of conflicting alibis, sensational rumors of satanic cult rituals, and terrifying revelations about Shelley's dark psychological state. Friends later disclosed that Shelley had frequently boasted about knowing how to make someone disappear, suggesting that the best way to dispose of a body was to first report the victim as missing, and then either burn the remains beyond recognition or drop them into an abandoned mine shaft. For years, the investigation stalled, plagued by dead ends, unverified rumors, and a lack of physical evidence that left the case languishing in cold obscurity. The agonizing grief experienced by Pamela's father, Paul Pitts, evolved over decades from a desperate desire for revenge into a quiet, relentless pursuit of justice for his daughter. The breakthrough that finally pierced the darkness came not from the initial crime scene, but from a terrifying echo of history unfolding years later. On May 25, 1991, college students exploring a cave system discovered a vertical mine shaft containing the decomposing body of a young white male wrapped in a waterbed mattress liner. An autopsy revealed he had been shot in the head. The victim was identified as 24-year-old Ray Clerks, an aspiring pilot and the boyfriend of Shelley Norgard, who had recently planned to end their relationship and moved back to California without her. Confronted with this chilling parallel, the second roommate of Shelley's to vanish and turn up dead, investigators executed a search warrant on the home and vehicle shared by Shelley and Ray, discovering lingering traces of blood in the trunk and Shelley's fingerprint on a flashlight recovered from the mine shaft. Facing overwhelming physical evidence, Shelley eventually pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in 1993 and was sentenced to 20 years in the Arizona State Prison, offering a glimpse into a chilling capacity for lethal violence driven by abandonment rage and possessive fury. Yet, the shadow over Pamela Pitts' murder remained unresolved for nearly 3 decades until a dedicated cold case team reopened the file in 2011. Investigators painstakingly reviewed past interviews and re-examined 97 recorded jail phone calls made by Shelley prior to her release from prison in May of 2011. In a pivotal conversation with her father, a sudden, heavy silence fell over the line when discussing the unresolved circumstances of the past, providing the crucial circumstantial puzzle piece needed to secure an indictment. On June 2nd, 2017, nearly 30 years after the horrific crime, investigators confronted Shelley Norgar Harmon, resulting in a defiant resignation as she was placed under arrest for the murder of Pamela Pitts. Facing the immense hurdles of the 30-year-old case, where many witnesses had passed away or lost their memories, prosecutors ultimately reached a resolution through a plea agreement in March of 2021. Standing before the court, Shelley offered a partial confession, recounting a heated altercation on the night of September 16, 1988, where she struck Pamela repeatedly until she stopped breathing. Though she refused to speak about the horrific events that followed her death, credited for the 20 years already served for the murder of Ray Clerks and the time spent awaiting trial, Shelley walked out of custody at the age of 50, leaving grieving families to grapple with an imperfect yet definitive legal accounting. Though the ultimate sentencing did not match the severity of the loss, the relentless endurance of investigators and the unwavering dedication of father ensured that the truth finally emerged from the silence. Pamela Pitts is remembered today not by the darkness of her tragic end, but by the radiant light of her spirit, a young woman whose memory continues to live on in the hearts of those who loved her, forever defined by her boundless energy, her love for family, and an unyielding quest for justice that spanned generations. The autumn air of 1988 carried a sharp chill to the pine-scented landscape of Prescott, Arizona, masking the dark currents running beneath the surface of the close-knit community. 19-year-old Pamela Pitts was a vibrant soul, a young woman whose bright smile and infectious enthusiasm for life illuminated every room she entered. As the oldest of 4 siblings, she anchored her family with warmth and unwavering support, acting as a devoted mentor and a cherished companion to those who relied on her, eager to embrace her independence. Pam had recently moved into a shared apartment with 18-year-old Shelley Norgard, a young woman whose own background remained shrouded in mystery and whose history was marked by deep-seated struggles with abandonment and family pressure. Shelley had viewed living with Pam as a rare chance to forge a genuine familial connection, but the domestic harmony was short-lived. Financial strains quickly fractured their relationship, with unpaid rent mounting and tensions reaching a breaking point as Pam quietly made plans to move back home with her father, Paul Pitts. Behind Shelley's quiet exterior lay a volatile mixture of resentment and fear of being left behind once more. She perceived Pam as the source of all her mounting failures, and as whispers of bitter disputes began to circulate among their acquaintances, the groundwork for tragedy was quietly laid. On the 16th of September, 1988, the popular teenager vanished without a single trace, leaving behind her car, her purse, and all personal belongings, a chilling detail that her roommate conspicuously failed to mention to grieving relatives. 13 agonizing days later, on the evening of September 29, 1988, a local target shooter making his way back through the Prescott National Forest stumbled upon a gruesome sight near a popular gathering spot known to locals as Gordo's Pit. What initially appeared to be a discarded pile of garbage bags concealing burned debris revealed a horrifying reality when the observer noticed a human arm protruding from the ash. The Yavapai County Sheriff's Office responded swiftly, unearthing a body burned beyond all immediate recognition. The brutality of the act was staggering. The victim had been subjected to extreme indignities, layers of debris piled atop her frame, and set ablaze in an effort to erase her identity. Forensic examination later confirmed through dental records that the remains belonged to the missing Pamela Pitts. Inside the mind of the perpetrator, a terrifying convergence of possessiveness and blind rage had taken root. Shelley Norgard had spent the night of the disappearance frantically searching for her roommate, consumed by the conviction that Pam was single-handedly ruining her existence. Witnesses later recounted Shelley's chilling theories on how to effectively make someone vanish, without a trace, advocating for the creation of a missing persons report followed by the destruction of evidence through fire or abandonment in a deep mine shaft. Despite these dark utterances and the glaring inconsistency of Pam's untouched belongings left inside the apartment, investigators faced a frustrating lack of physical evidence during the initial investigation. Alibis provided by associates, including Shelley and her boyfriend Ray Clerks, created a labyrinth of conflicting timelines that allowed the truth to slip away, plunging the case into a seemingly endless dormancy as years bled into one another. The chilling reality of Shelley Norgard's capacity for violence did not fully manifest until May 25, 1991. When college explorers descending into a vertical mine shaft discovered a decomposing body wrapped in a waterbed mattress liner and suspended by timber, the victim, shot in the head, was identified as 24-year-old Ray Clerks, Shelley's subsequent roommate and romantic partner, who had planned to return to California without her, faced with the closing circle of evidence, including her fingerprint recovered from a flashlight inside the mine shaft and the unmistakable smell of death lingering in the trunk of her car. Shelley ultimately confessed to the horrific crime. She described how a dispute over taking their dogs during a breakup had caused her to snap, shooting Ray on the hood of his vehicle before orchestrating an elaborate cover-up to drop his body into the abyss. Convicted of second-degree murder in 1993, Shelley was sentenced to 20 years in the Arizona State Prison. Yet the shadow of suspicion regarding Pamela Pitts' unsolved murder continued to linger over her like an unfinished requiem. Decades passed in heavy silence, but the determination of dedicated investigators and a grieving father never wavered. In March of 2011, a cold case team reopened an investigation into Pamela's death, scrutinizing past statements and monitoring recorded prison telephone calls as Shelley approached her eventual release date. Among dozens of intercepted conversations, a single pregnant pause during a call to her father regarding ongoing police inquiries sent a shockwave through the investigative team, a silent admission that echoed with decades of concealed guilt. On June 2, 2017, authorities confronted Shelley Norgard Harmon, meeting her defiant resignation with an arrest warrant for the 1988 murder of Pamela Pitts. As the case finally proceeded toward trial in March of 2021, the passage of 30 years had robbed the prosecution of key witnesses and physical certainty, presenting a formidable legal hurdle. To spare the aging family from a protracted courtroom battle and ensure some measure of finality, a plea agreement was reached. Shelley stood before the court and offered a chilling narrative of the final moments on September 16, 1988, admitting to a heated argument that escalated into a frenzied physical assault where she struck her roommate until breathing ceased. Yet, she offered no remorse regarding the subsequent desecration of the body through fire, leaving a void where complete honesty should have resided, because of credit served for her previous conviction and time spent awaiting trial. The confession allowed Shelley to walk out of custody at the age of 50, a reality that left loved ones grappling with a profound sense of incomplete justice. Though the legal resolution fell short of the ultimate accountability her family desired, the memory of Pamela Pitts endures far beyond the darkness of her tragic end. She remains remembered not through the lens of the violence inflicted upon her, but as a bright, luminous spirit whose enthusiasm for life, boundless energy, and deep devotion to her family left an indelible mark on all who had the privilege of knowing her. A popular teen is found dead at a local party spot. I do not even know how to describe it. It was horrific. As investigators dig into the case, they will uncover a slew of suspects. And shocking allegations will cast a dark shadow on this small town. There was cult activity. In fact, the rumor was that it was some sort of ritualized killing. Her body was burned beyond recognition. As authorities navigate a twisted investigation, the body count rises. When they looked down in there was a dead body hung up on some lumber or a tree or something. A trail of blood linked two murders. But will the killer walk free? Very few of these cold case files ever come to fruition. I want the world to know there is somebody out there that murdered two people. The Prescott National Forest provides Prescott, Arizona residents with endless recreational activities. People rode their dirt bikes out there and would go shooting out there during the daytime. On the evening of September 29th, 1988, one target shooter is just finishing up for the night. As he makes his way back to his truck, he comes across one of the area's many fire pits. So there was a pile of garbage bags there, and a portion of it had been burned. And he saw what he thought was a stick poking up out of the burned area. But as the gentleman moves closer, he makes a horrific discovery. He realized it was an arm. At which point he had to go to, I believe he went to a drugstore to call 911. Within minutes, the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office responds to the area just outside of Prescott city limits, known to locals as Gordo's Pit, where they quickly locate a body. You could tell that there was stuff that had been dumped on top and had been set on fire. It was incredibly brutal and demeaning. The body was burned beyond recognition. I do not even know how to describe it. It was horrific. Investigators look around for clues but have little success. A lot of the other stuff that was around was hard to discern whether that was trash or associated with the homicide. The scientific testing that we do now with DNA, we can learn very quickly from a lab whether it is related to our case or not. Back then, they did not have a lot of those tools. It could have been the murder location and the dump site, or it could have just been the dump site. But there was no way to determine if that was the murder site. As investigators continue assessing the scene, the victim is transported to the coroner's office. The medical examiner, he labeled it homicidal violence, but he could not determine what actually caused the death. Because of the condition of her body, there was no way to determine more. What was found at autopsy were heat kill fly larvae, as he documented it. So from the time the body dies, there's a period of time before the body is found. There's a time before the larvae can grow to a certain level, and then they were burned. The general's area of the scene was fairly clear. It was likely they were killed at another location. While the cause of death is unknown, the coroner is able to identify the victim. There was a dental records comparison made, and it was determined that the victim was Pamela Pitts. The night of Pamela Pitts' last seen was a night of September 16th, 1988. Pam was missing 13 days. Pam was originally reported as a missing person within the city limits of Prescott. So the Prescott Police Department had an investigation into her as a missing person. The Yavapai County Sheriff's Office alerts Prescott PD about the discovery, and both entities join forces. Once we know who the victim is, the first place you go is to the people that they knew. You go to the family. They came to my house in the evening and came in and sat down and said they had recovered a body and that according to the dental records that it was Pam. Pam's family is devastated by the news. It was like, I do not even know how to describe that. It was not only heartbreaking but mind-boggling at the same time. So I was trying to balance all that stuff and figure out who in the heck could have done this to my daughter. 19-year-old Pam Pitts was known for her bright smile and zest for life. Pam was a wonderful kid. She was always doing something, always wanted to have fun. She was the type of person who could make friends with anybody. She was outgoing and just excited about life. The oldest of four, Pam loved nothing more than her family. She was my sidekick. She was awesome with all the kids, and she was an awesome mentor. Pam was a pretty amazing big sister, and she took me under her wing. She would guide me through life, basically. She was always there. I could count on her. I was able to confide in her. By age 19, Pam was ready to leave the nest and moved in with her new friend, Shelley Norgard. I think she met Shelley by mutual contact with other friends. They became really good friends, and they did a lot of things together. They had some friends in common. Shelley was always kind of awkward. I do not recall Shelley ever talking about her background. It had always been a mystery to me where she came from, and you know where her parents were. It seemed like they were never around or in the picture. It was just Shelley, and Shelley was just there. For 18-year-old Shelley, living with Pam was finally her chance to have a family connection after years of struggling with her own. From what I have seen, it almost appears as though Shelley had some abandonment issues in the way that the divorce happened and the mom left, and then there was pressure between her and her dad. Her dad was pretty strict. He seemed to be a stern taskmaster, and she made it really clear that she did not want to have to move back with him if Pam was to move out of the house. After moving in with Shelley during the summer of 1988, Pam got a job at a local restaurant to make ends meet. Though she had many interests, she was not quite sure what she wanted to do with her life. She talked about going to beauty college, and that was one of her goals. I figured she would get into something like that, beauty college or fashion design or something. She was very artistic. In August of 1988, a month after the move, Pam reconnected with an old flame named Bobby Kitchener. We were taking it slow. She was reinvigorated about hanging out with me, which was very exciting to me because I still had a lot of feeling for her at the time. Her life really revolved around friends and family and hanging out with people and having a good time. But on September 16th, 1988, the popular teen vanished without a trace. Shelley called and she said, "Want to know if I knew where Pam was?" And I said, "No, I do not know." She goes, "Well, I am not sure where she is at. I have not seen her. She took off and did not come home last night." At first, Paul was not too concerned, but when Pam failed to show up to work on Monday, he became worried. She just was not that kind of person that she would just disappear, no contact, no nothing. And so at that point I said, something is wrong. So I called the police department about it. And now 13 days later, it seems Paul's worst fears come true. They came right out and told me the condition of Pam's body at the time. They found that her body had been set on fire and burned beyond recognition. When I got that information, the first thing that goes through your mind is who could do something like this? And why would somebody do this to Pam? Coming up, as investigators search for a killer, they unearth a bitter feeling. She said that everything is wrong in my life she is responsible for, and a shocking statement raises a red flag. You ever make a statement to anybody about how to dispose of a body by fire? I probably did. At that time, anybody was a suspect, as far as I can say. September 29, 1988. The Yavapai County Sheriff's Office and Prescott Police are searching for the killer of 19-year-old Pam Pitts, a Prescott local who had gone missing nearly 2 weeks prior. It just knocks the wind out of you and breaks your heart. Speaking with homicide detectives, Pam's father, Paul, says not long after he reported Pam's disappearance, he learned some troubling news. I found out from the police, actually, that Pam's car was at home this whole time. Her purse and all her personal belongings were in the house. Shelley never pointed any of that out to me. I know that if it was somebody I lived with and they were gone, but all their personal belongings were there, I would not have left that detail out. There is obviously some suspicion going on. According to Paul, Pam and her roommate, Shelley Norgard's friendship had recently become tumultuous. They were having issues over money within a couple of months. What she told me was that the rent was not getting paid. And she told me, she says, "I am ready to move back home. Dad," she said, "you okay with that?" And I said, "Of course, I am okay with that." And I said, "When do you want to do this?" And she says, "Well, I have not told Shelley yet." But she said, "I am going to let her know. I will tell you how it goes." Paul says he was happy with Pam's decision to move out, as he had heard of Shelley's reputation around town. From the other kids that had contact with her, they said that she was not very trustworthy, that she told a lot of stories and lied a lot, and she was not an honest person, with Pam and Shelley's relationship seemingly on the rocks. Investigators have their first person of interest, but when they sit down with Shelley on October 5th, she paints a very different picture. Shelley explains that rooming with Pam was great at first, but after a while, the two got into a financial bind over the rent. Investigators pressed Shelley for her alibi the night Pam disappeared. Shelley's story is she got off work. She went and got Ray, Clark's her boyfriend. They went to Jack in the Box to meet friends. And they went out to some other Embry-Riddle student's apartment to watch a movie. So between about 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning, she just drove around. Sensing Shelley may be waffling, detectives keep pressing her for more information. After releasing Shelley, investigators turn to the next closest person in Pam's life, her boyfriend Bobby Kitchener. According to Bobby, he has spent the evening of September 16th with Pam. I had been downtown, and she was in my car. Her and I together. On the other side of the courthouse was a parking lot, and we would hang out there and talk with friends and watch the other people cruise by. Bobby tells investigators he left Pam with her friends and headed to work around 9:30. She told him at that time that she was just going to spend the evening at home. So that is the last time we know for sure that Pam was around. We want to look at boyfriends, because they would have been in Pam's inner circle, and so they were able to determine that Bobby Kitchener, he had an alibi after striking Bobby from the suspect list. Investigators circle back to confirming Shelley's alibi and bring in her boyfriend, Ray Clerks, for questioning. They ask Ray for his timeline for the night of the 16th, and he basically tells them he does not know what Shelley did after 11:30, because that is when she went home. So then the detective immediately says, well, she told us she went home at 2:30 in the morning, and Ray says to them, well, that could be, it might have been 2:30. Ray says he cannot remember exactly which night they are referring to since it was weeks before, but he assures investigators he has no idea who could have killed Pam. He basically told them he was tired of talking to them and did not want to talk to the cops anymore, so that pretty much put an end to Ray's involvement. With Ray unable to confirm Shelley's alibi, detectives speak to more of the friends she was with on the night of the murder, exposing a shocking revelation. They said Shelley was angry, and she was looking for Pam on the night of the 16th. While they are conducting these interviews, they learned Shelley said, have you seen my roommate? She is doing bad things. Everything is wrong in my life. She is responsible for, and I am trying to find her. It did not sound like the relationship was as happy as she had made it out to be Thursday night. Shelley's friends also remember some unusual things she had said in the past. She would make comments about how she knows how to get rid of a body. The best way to get rid of somebody is to first make them a missing person and then either burn them, beyond recognition, or to drop them in a mine shaft. It was well known that Shelley had some pretty strong theories on how to make people disappear and get rid of the evidence. Alarmed by these allegations, detectives immediately bring Shelley in for another interview. Why? Coming up, as investigators zero in on Shelley, new theories emerge. I heard satanic cult was involved. Kids who were out at that party talked about this possible fight. And a horrific discovery throws investigators a curveball. It was a white male in a state of decomposition who had been dropped down in the vertical mine shaft. October 1988. It has been a month since the body of Prescott teen Pam Pitts was found burned and dumped in a forest. Now investigators wonder if bad blood between Pam and her roommate, Shelley Norgard, could have led to her brutal murder. At that time, anybody was a suspect as far as I can say. Investigators obtained a warrant to search Shelley and Pam's apartment. There were searches of that residence. It was difficult to determine that anything happened there in the house. There was simply no evidence to point to anybody. There was no physical evidence. There was no DNA evidence. There was nothing. They also had what they believed was a pretty solid alibi from Shelley in that she was with all these people throughout the night. Still at a loss for where Pam was actually killed, investigators decide to look closer at the site where Pam's body was found. And they catch a break when they learn there may have been witnesses in the area on the night of the 16th. A couple weeks later, they learn about the party that occurred at Gordo's Pit from the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office. The sheriff's office responded to that party that night and chased all the kids off and then came back later and made sure there was nobody there and there weren't any fires burning and that kind of thing. Investigators interview local teens to see if anyone saw Pam at the party that night. They eventually found a couple guys that said they had seen Pam at the park. But some of Pam's friends tell detectives that they believe more ominous events than just parties were taking place at the popular hangout spot. I heard a satanic cult was involved. There were a lot of rumors. One of them was about it was a satanic worshiper sacrifice. You know, back in the 80s, that was a big thing. In fact, there was cult activity. That was confirmed by an investigator. The rumor was that Pam was somehow used in some sort of ritualized killing. While rumors run rampant in the town of Prescott, investigators run down every lead. But months pass and nothing materializes. That was a complete and total thing that came out of the rumor mill, I guess you would say, in this thing. These are all the stories that fell apart. They looked into them, could not corroborate them, and let them go. But in the summer of 1989, after reviewing past witness statements, investigators finally uncover a promising lead. A small number of those interviews talked about this possible fight between Melinda Perry and Pam Pitts. The way it would happen. She went up and was talking to Pam for her hangout at the park, and they started a fight. And during the fight, Pamela got thrown on the ground. She kicked her head like 3 or 4 or 5 times before anybody pulled her off. And then when someone pulled her off, she got up and she fell down. The theory was that maybe Melinda tracked her down later. Maybe Pam was over there by the fire pit where she was located. And that maybe Melinda, because of that leftover rage, had finished her off. Investigators immediately haul an 18-year-old Melinda Perry for questioning. Okay, tell us about the fight you got into with Pam. I did not get in a fight with Pam. Detectives pressed Melinda for her alibi. Friday night, there was a party at the America Motel. Okay, and I guess there were some people there, and they were being too loud. So landlord or my manager or whatever, they were told to get out of there. All right, you were there? I was at the motel. All of a sudden, after a year without a suspect, they have a good suspect. They kept asking her questions and doing interviews, and she kept telling them, but she was not telling them what they wanted to hear. They wanted her confession. Authorities still are not convinced she did not kill Pam. And in August of 1989, Melinda is summoned to appear before an investigative grand jury. I think their theory was that they could put her on the stand and, under oath, compel her to tell the truth. I tell them I never fought Pamela Pitts. I was never in a fight with Pamela Pitts. After that, I felt I was free to go. You know what I mean? But not long after, Melinda is arrested for perjury. Somebody told them that I kicked her head. I kicked her head until she passed out. And they booked me for 3 counts of perjury, so that I had lied on the stand. It was determined that Melinda Perry had made inconsistent statements to the grand jury. Investigators interrogate Melinda once more, but she does not waver. I was scared, to say the least. You know, I was a kid. I did not know what to do. Eventually, Melinda's perjury charges are dropped. Her whereabouts were pretty well documented for that weekend. And obviously, that charge did not hold up. For 2 years, I fought that. And then they had to close the case. They did not have any evidence of that. I left Arizona. I went to Nevada that very day. It was just traumatic for me. Though investigators head back to the drawing board, nothing sticks. I would say about 3 years. It had gone fairly stale. Cold. It becomes a cold case when you run out of leads. You run out of people to interview, and you have no more evidence to analyze. I mean, at that point, you need something to trigger it again. Very few of these cold case files ever come to fruition. You know, I was willing to do whatever it took and wait as long as I had to wait for something to break in her case. Suddenly, on May 25th, 1991, a shocking discovery dredges Pam's case back into the light. Presby College students are exploring a cave, and then it led to a vertical mine shaft. And when they looked down in there was a dead body hung up on a lumber or tree or something. The sheriff's office came in to begin the investigation. It was a white male, young male, from what they could tell, in a state of decomposition, who had been wrapped in a waterbed liner, like a waterbed mattress liner, and then dropped down in the vertical mine shaft. After retrieving the body, the coroner quickly determines the cause of death. The autopsy revealed that he had been shot in the head. He was in a state of decomposition. So it had been some time, several weeks. The Yavapai County Medical Examiner was able to determine through general records that the deceased individual located in the mine shaft was Ray Kurz, boyfriend of Shelley Norgard. Ray's family actually ended up reporting him missing. He was supposed to have showed up for a wedding in California and did not. And that really alarmed everybody because apparently he was very responsible. He was going to be a pilot, and he would just not miss something without letting people know. According to Ray's missing persons report, filed on May 28, 1991, Shelley and Ray had been living together at the time of his disappearance 3 days prior. The detectives recognized that, hey, this is the second roommate that Shelley has to go missing and turn up dead. Maybe we ought to look into Shelley a little more. When investigators notify Ray's family about his death, they are clear on who they believe is responsible. Ray was planning on moving back to California and was not going to take Shelley with him. And then the relationship was going to end, basically. Investigators have heard the story before. You have two individuals, Pamela Pitts and then Ray Kurz, who have decided that they're going to leave Shelley Norgard in a physical way and in an emotional way. She does not want that. She is angry. Coming up, new evidence finally connects to an all-too-familiar suspect. One print was recovered from one of the flashlights. That, of course, put her in the mine trap. I was like, oh my goodness, finally something. After discovering the body of 24-year-old Ray Clerks, incriminating physical evidence now suggests his girlfriend, 21-year-old Shelley Norgard, is responsible for his death. Shelley Norgard's fingerprints, or one print, was recovered from one of the flashlights that they located in the mine trap, so that, of course, put her in the mine trap, with evidence mounting. Investigators head to homes Shelley and Ray shared with a search warrant in hand. The big thing with that case was Shelley's car. When they walked up to the car, they immediately noticed the smell of death in and around Shelley's car. In the trunk, they found evidence that a dead body had been stored there. There was blood present, and it was the same blood type as Ray's. The evidence is enough to place Shelley under arrest on June 4th, 1991. After a couple years of it being in the court, she eventually pled guilty. So as a term of her guilty plea, she had to provide a statement on what happened to Ray. Shelley tells the court it all started when Ray broke things off. They were out watching stars, stargazing, I guess, and he was laying on top of the car. And when he told her that he was going to take the dogs with him, she lost her mind. Shelley shot him in the head while he was laying on the hood of the car. Shelley says after that, she panicked. She says then she was so shocked by what she had done that she got a blanket out and covered Ray up so she could not see him anymore, and then put him in the trunk of the car and basically drove the car out in the woods and left it there for a couple weeks before she could get a four-wheel drive truck to come transfer the body to the top of the mountain to drop him in the mine shaft. It was midway through the trial in 1993 that she decided to accept a plea deal. The charge was dropped from murder in the first degree to murder in the second degree. And so her sentence was 20 years in Arizona State Prison. News of Shelley's confession and plea quickly spreads to the family of Pam Pitts. I felt that she got off easy. She should have gotten life or the death penalty. That is how I felt about it. I was glad that she was in jail because, at least then she could not kill anybody else. Pam's family hopes the sentence will buy some time for investigators to finally connect Shelley to Pam's case as well. She might have been afraid that he was going to tell on her or let that secret out at some point. Though investigators are suspicious of Shelley, their hands are tied. The issue you had is there is still no evidence. Regardless of whether Shelley killed Ray or not, it does not still indicate that she killed Pam without something more. 18 long years passed with no new leads on Pam's case. It just went kind of cold for a long time. Just really cold. At first, you want revenge. You know, you want to find this person, and you do not care what happens to them. But, as time goes on, it is not about hate and revenge anymore. It is about justice for your daughter. In March of 2011, 23 years after Pam's murder, a cold case team reopens the investigation. When it was handed to me, I did not know anything about the Ray clerk's murder. I think the lieutenant intentionally kept that from me so as not to taint my thought processes. But it does not take long for Detective Dart to get up to speed. I remember looking at it going, wait a second. Shelley killed somebody late in 1990. What? Now I have got somebody in this case who is capable of murder. Not to mention, Shelley was the only one who seems to have a motive to hurt Pam. She was making that very clear on the night of the 16th, that Pam was behind all the bad things in her life, and she was going to find Pam, and she was going to deal with it, and she was going to take care of the problem. In February of 2011, investigators re-interview Shelley about Pam's case, hoping the added pressure will cause her to incriminate herself on recorded jail calls. Shelley was due for release within a few months, so I talked to Shelley for about an hour in the prison, not to interrogate her, just to remind her that we are still looking into this. So they had that conversation with her, and then they immediately began collecting all her phone calls from that point. Unfortunately, investigators cannot find anything against Shelley in the 97 phone calls she made between the interview and her release in May of 2011. She got released from Department of Corrections, and she got a job. She meets a man. They end up getting married, moving in together. Her name now, instead of Shelley Norgard, is Shelley Norgard Harmon. She kind of assumed, I guess, a new life, you would say. Investigators continue efforts with Pam's case, but department moves and heavy caseloads cause delays. Finally, in the spring of 2017, 6 years after Shelley's release, investigators hit pay dirt. I remembered, whatever happened to those calls? So I actually listened to all 97 of them myself. She called her dad and told him the detectives were here. They are still looking into the Pam Pitts case. He asked her, "Are we okay?" You can tell he is concerned about what is going to happen, and they talk about Shelley is going to get an attorney. Well, that is what I have been thinking for 20 years. But then I do not know exactly. You have never told me what actually happened. So I am kind of up in the air again now that you do not like it. And then the line just goes silent. When I heard that, I got a hair stood up on my arms, and I was like, oh my goodness, finally something. So that statement in the context of them talking about the night Pam went missing, that was enough with all the other circumstantial evidence we had to get an indictment on Shelley. On June 2nd, 2017, investigators make their move. I went in, identified myself, told her where I was from, and you could just see this look, almost like defiant resignation. I would like to talk to you about 1988. Am I under arrest? You may be. I may be. But I need to see a lawyer. Okay, then. You are under arrest for the murder of Pam Pitts. Coming up, as the trial looms, prosecutors face an uphill battle. A lot of our witnesses are either dead or just simply do not remember. It is kind of long shot. And Pam's family makes a tough choice. You cannot tell me that this was an accident. I do not believe it. That is something that is extremely personal and shows a lot of hate for somebody. June 2017. After serving 20 years for murdering her former boyfriend, Ray Clerks, Shelley Harmon now faces charges for the 1988 murder of her former roommate, Pam Pitts. My favorite part of the whole thing was being able to meet with Pam's dad and tell him that the arrest had been made. That was the best feeling I have had in my entire career. I could not believe it. After 30 years, I just could not believe it. I got up and shook his hand and hugged him. And I just kept saying, I cannot believe it. Cannot believe it. Thank God. But as the case heads to trial, it faces a number of setbacks. The problem remains that it is a 30-year-old case, and a lot of our witnesses are either dead or have dementia or just simply do not remember what all happened back then. So to try this case, to say it was a 50-50, it is kind of a long shot that we actually get conviction out of. Prosecutors are forced to present Pam's family with a catch-22. So they try to have this plea agreement set up. The defense said that the only way that she would change her plea to guilty would be if she did not have to do any more time, knowing that she would not confess and tell the actual truth. I felt it was best just to go with the guilty plea. On March 1st, 2021, nearly 4 years after her arrest, Shelley stands before the court and gives her version of the events that transpired on September 16th, 1988. She said she had gone out looking for Pam at the party, and when she found her, she just wanted to talk to her. They had gone off on the side of the party and got into a heated debate and started getting into a fight. She goes, I do not know what happened. I hit her, and I knocked her down, and I just got on top of her, and I could not stop hitting her. And I just kept hitting her, and then she stopped breathing. And she heard voices coming, so she got up and left. That was essentially her confession. She would not talk about the body or what happened after she killed Pam. So we did not get any of that. You cannot tell me that, this was an accident. I do not believe it. I think she went so far as to pour gasoline on her body and set her on fire. And that is something that is extremely personal and shows a lot of hate for somebody. Following her statement, Shelley is released from custody at the age of 50. She got credit for 20 years for the time she served in prison for Ray Clerk's murder and the 3 or 4 years that she sat in county jail waiting for trial in the Pam Pitts case. And for the confession that she killed Pam, she got to walk out. I look at it and I go, well, the main thing is she did confess to it, and she did get convicted, and it was justice for Pam. Did it look like we wanted to look like? No. In terms of, I would like to have seen her get the maximum sentence for what she did. But you have to take the sometimes small victories that you get and hang on to those and cherish those. I want the world to know that there is somebody walking the streets. There is somebody out there that murdered 2 people. 2 people that she so professed to love, a boyfriend and a best friend. Though 2 lives were taken, Pam and Ray's memories live on in the hearts of all that knew them. Ray had a lot of potential. He wanted to be a commercial airline pilot, and that was kind of ran in the family, and that family was extremely tight. So the tighter the family, it is the more it hurts when you lose that. I want Pam to be remembered as a young lady who loved life and could not wait to get out there and live it. It is a shame that it got cut short like it did, but I know she would have been quite the fireball if she was alive today. A popular teen is found dead at a local party spot, and the discovery is nothing short of horrific, sending shockwaves through the quiet community of Prescott, Arizona, as investigators dig into the case. They uncover a slew of suspects and shocking allegations that cast a dark and lingering shadow over the small town, with persistent rumors swirling about cult activity and a ritualized killing. Her body was burned beyond recognition, creating an immense barrier for authorities as they navigate a twisted investigation where the body count tragically rises over the years. When investigators eventually look down into a vertical mine shaft in a later grim discovery, a dead body is found hung up on lumber, revealing a horrifying trail of blood that links 2 brutal murders together. Yet, as the legal proceedings unfold, the overarching question remains whether the killer will truly face justice or ultimately walk free, knowing that very few cold case files of this magnitude ever come to full fruition. The loved ones left behind simply want the world to know that there is somebody out there who murdered 2 innocent people in cold blood. The picturesque Prescott National Forest provides residents with endless recreational activities. ranging from dirt biking to daytime target shooting, serving as a peaceful backdrop for the community. On the evening of September 29th, 1988, one target shooter is just finishing up for the night when he makes his way back to his truck and comes across one of the area's many fire pits. Noticing a pile of garbage bags with a portion of what had been burned, he initially sees what he thinks is a stick poking up out of the burned area. But as the gentleman moves closer, he makes a horrific discovery and realizes it is a human arm. He immediately rushes to find a phone to call emergency services, and within minutes, the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office responds to the area just outside city limits, quickly locating a body that clearly had debris dumped on top and been deliberately set on fire. The sheer brutality of the act is staggering, leaving the victim burned beyond recognition in a crime scene that leaves seasoned investigators searching desperately for clues amidst ambiguous debris. Without the advanced scientific testing and DNA databases available today, investigators in 1988 faced severe limitations in determining whether surrounding items were related to the homicide or simply routine trash, or whether the location was a primary crime scene or merely a secondary dump site. Transported to the coroner's office, the medical examiner could only label the cause of death as homicidal violence without being able to pinpoint the exact physiological mechanism due to the extensive thermal damage. However, microscopic analysis revealed heat-kill fly larvae, providing forensic entomologists with a timeline regarding the post-mortem interval before the body was subjected to fire. Dental records ultimately provided the crucial breakthrough, allowing authorities to definitively identify the victim as 19-year-old Pamela Pitts, who had been reported missing 13 days earlier on September 16, 1988. Pamela was widely known for her bright smile, radiant energy, and deep love for her family, serving as an inspirational big sister and a cherished confidant to her siblings. Eager to experience independence, she had recently moved out of her family home to live with a new friend named Shelley Norgard, a young woman whose mysterious background and apparent abandonment issues created an immediate aura of emotional vulnerability. Shelley viewed living with Pam as her golden opportunity to forge a stable family connection, especially given her strained relationship with stern and strict father whom she desperately wished to avoid. However, financial pressures surrounding rent began to mount, and tensions escalated when Pam privately informed her father of her intention to move back home because the living arrangement had deteriorated. Unbeknownst to them, this impending separation would trigger a dark and fatal resentment within Shelley, who perceived Pam's departure as an unbearable personal rejection. As the investigation intensified, police scrutinized the timelines of those closest to Pamela, initially examining her boyfriend Bobby Kitchener, who quickly established a solid alibi for the night of her disappearance. Attention then turned towards Shelley Norgard and her boyfriend Ray Clerks, whose conflicting statements and shaky timelines immediately raised red flags for homicide detectives. Witnesses soon came forward to reveal that on the night of September 16th, Shelley had been frantically searching for Pamela, expressing deep anger and blaming her roommate for everything going wrong in her life. Furthermore, acquaintances recalled chilling past remarks from Shelley detailing her precise theories on how to successfully make someone disappear by reporting them as a missing person and subsequently disposing of their body through fire or dropping them into a deep mine shaft. Despite these ominous indicators and the suspicious discovery of Pamela's personal belongings, an automobile left untouched inside the apartment, a lack of definitive physical evidence left investigators temporarily stymied. Years passed with the case going cold, leaving Pamela's grieving family in an agonizing state of limbo as they yearned for truth and accountability. The narrative took another shocking turn in May of 1991 when college students, exploring a cave system, discovered a vertical mine shaft containing a decomposing body wrapped in a waterbed mattress liner. An autopsy revealed that the young white male had been shot in the head, and dental records tragically identified him as Ray Clerks, Shelley Norgard's boyfriend, who had been reported missing after failing to arrive for a family wedding in California. The realization that a second roommate of Shelley's had vanished and turned up dead galvanized investigators to re-examine her with renewed intensity. Incriminating physical evidence soon materialized when Shelley's fingerprint was recovered from a flashlight inside the mine shaft, and the trunk of her car tested positive for human blood, matching Ray's blood type, carrying the unmistakable scent of decomposition. Facing overwhelming pressure, Shelley Norgard was arrested and eventually entered a guilty plea to second-degree murder in 1993, receiving a 20-year sentence in state prison after confessing that she had shot Ray in the head during a dispute over their dogs while stargazing. Although this conviction ensured she remained behind bars for a time, Pamela Pitts' family continued to ache for justice in their daughter's unresolved homicide. Decades later, in 2011, a dedicated cold case team reopened Pamela's file, meticulously reviewing 97 recorded jail phone calls made by Shelley prior to her eventual prison release. A chilling phrase captured in one of those calls, where Shelley discussed the ongoing police inquiries with her father and abruptly cut off the conversation when he asked what truly happened, provided the critical circumstantial context needed to secure an indictment. In June of 2015, facing the mounting weight of circumstantial evidence and historical forensic reviews, Shelley Norgard stood before the court and finally offered a constrained version of the events of September 16, 1988, admitting to a violent physical altercation that ended Pamela's life during a heated confrontation near the party spot. Although the plea agreement and legal constraints allowed her to be released for time served, the ultimate conviction brought a measure of official accountability, ensuring that her confession was permanently entered into the judicial record. Pamela's family and the investigators who dedicated their careers to the pursuit of truth ultimately found solace in knowing that the memory of a vibrant young woman who loved life deeply would forever outlast the dark shadows cast by a deeply troubled perpetrator.